to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, March 13th, 2013, middle of the week, hump day, starting the long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another weekend. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A couple of quick program notes. Bill Shaw from Legal Debt Dismissal will be our guest tomorrow to talk about how to exploit the mistakes being made, and they're crimes, let's be honest, crimes. Your document generation, false notary stuff, every time they make a mistake, it means you can get out of the debt problem that you're in, and Bill's going to be coming in to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Claire, of course, will be joining us in hour number 3 of Friday here. Right now, all the eyes of the Catholic world and the corporate media, they're focused on that chimney above the Sistine Chapel. The Cardinals are in the middle of their 5th ballot there, and so far today, nothing but black smoke has been pouring out of that chimney, which means they have not been able to elect a new pope, or somebody knocked over some of the candles, and the Cardinals are running around inside actually on fire, and they're pounding on the doors trying to get out, and the Swiss Guard is saying, you can't come out till you vote a new pope. So we'll find out what's going on, but the media is just, they're looking at the chimney and saying, any minute there'll be smoke coming out of there, and they're really hyping this and pumping it. And I understand to Catholics, this is an important situation. But on the other hand, it feels to me like it's more conduitization. Look at the chimney. Don't look at what's going on in Korea or Wall Street or the rest of it. The drama behind the selection of a new pope continues to build because apparently one of the front runners to be the new pope is Cardinal Angelo Scola. He's the Archbishop of Milan. He comes from a very old and wealthy family. There's a castle near Milan that was built by his family back in the Renaissance. And apparently Italy's anti-mafia police have swooped into Milan, all across Lombardy. They're raiding homes, offices, clinics, and hospitals, basically investigating corruption linked to tenders by and supplies to hospitals, and some of these are apparently tied into the Catholic Church, which puts them right in the lap of the good cardinal. So it's seeming to build a little bit of scandal there that doesn't involve the little altar boys. And again, back when they were really focusing on the reason for the resignation of Pope Benny, and they were focusing on the child molestation and its cover-up, which is a serious crime. But we were also getting word that a second financial network owned by the Catholic Church, operating outside of the Vatican Bank, had been uncovered, and may in fact represent the majority of the wealth held by the Church, which they're trying to keep away from all those lawyers suing on behalf of the little kiddies. And that may actually be part of what this scandal is about. We don't really know. Now, before I get off this topic, I received a whole bunch of very nasty emails from Catholics screaming about how dare you talk about the molestation, and they all have as their central theme, really, child molestation is everywhere, and you shouldn't make a big deal about the Church. And because this theme seems to have erupted simultaneously throughout the Church's supporters, it is feeling to me like this is the new official talking point coming out of the Vatican. Well, yes, child molestation is widespread. My issue here is the hypocrisy and the cover-up. If you go over to somebody like NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, they openly say, yeah, we believe in old guys having sex with young boys. They're not lying about what they do. The issue with the Church is they claim to represent a supreme moral authority that opposes gays, opposes sex. They're all supposed to be celibate. And then we find out they're still doing the same thing the NAMBLA guys are doing. Which one is being the more honest with the world? That's the point. Back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And white smoke is pouring out of the Sistine. The bells are ringing. They've got a new top guy to hold that center seat, and everybody's all waiting for the announcement who's going to be the new pope, and we'll see what transpires on that. Moving on to other stories, of course, the U.S. Senate yesterday did approve John Brennan as the new director of the Central Intelligence Agency. despite his ties to the use of torture and the drone assassination, all of which are crimes under international law. And apparently Obama wanted Brennan 4 years ago, but because Obama was then thinking about his possible re-election, decided that he could not quite go along with that. Now, Dick Cheney is already out there saying that, torture is necessary to fight terrorism. We must go on doing it. And I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, everything the U.S. government doing is legal. It's the letter of the law. Well, so was everything Nazi Germany did. Everything Nazi Germany did was the letter of the law under their own government. If that made it right, why did we declare war on them? Why did we go to war? If a government saying that it's legal to tattoo flowers on the forehead of all their children, and that makes it okay, then, what's the big deal? But for everybody who's out there justifying rendition and torture and drone assassination by saying it is the letter of the law in the United States, you need to remind them everything the Nazis did was the letter of the law. And if simply being the letter of the law makes it okay, then why did we go to war? We all know that nations do evil things while claiming it is the letter of the law. And that's what Dick Cheney is doing. He's out there saying, oh, we must do this. It's legal. We decided it was legal to do this stuff. It's necessary. It's exactly the same thing the Nazis were saying when they did their enabling acts. I think if this idea that we need to fight terrorism justifies torture, then there's probably a lot of people in the U.S. government we need to waterboard. Starting with Cheney himself to find out just what he meant by the orders still standing as that airplane headed into the Pentagon. Going to take a phone call. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Michael. I saw your anxiety in there today, big guy. And, hey, I wanted to address three things today. Well, number one is I just had a chance yesterday to go dissect a little more into the Detroit Sad City and see those skyscrapers just sitting there empty with graffiti all over them. I mean, it just hits a shock in the heart to see those skyscrapers in Detroit sitting there with windows popped out and graffiti on them and that. And now, Michael, I just picked up that Atlanta is in trouble. I just saw an article that they're saying that down in Atlanta now that some of the suburbs are starting to crinkle like the city of Detroit. I don't know if you picked up any of that.
Yeah, the rot is definitely spreading.
Michael, yeah, and also, too, Michael, I wanted you to talk about possibly about that article I see on your page of our fearless leader going to Israel. And what you think that the reason that he is going there, and I saw the article, you probably know what's going on in the article, and I would just like you to reach out to me and to others about that situation of our fearless leader going there for the first time in history, to my knowledge. And, Michael, you keep up that good spirit, and you tell your wife I said hi, and we'll talk to you later there.
All right, thanks an awful lot. I was going to talk about Obama's going to Israel later in the show, but we'll touch on it right now. Obama and Netanyahu, of course, came to a severe parting of the ways during last year's election when Netanyahu was over here openly campaigning for Mitt Romney. And now, of course, Obama's a little less than enthusiastic about supporting Israel's agenda, but he's going over there ostensibly, well, they first said it was to address the peace process, then they backed off and said, no, we're not going to talk about that. He's going over there to basically communicate with the government. Well, Netanyahu can't form a coalition, and so it looks like it's little more than a press opportunity, so that Obama gets to stand at the Wailing Wall with the yarmulke on his head, touching the wall and looking somber, which seems to be a rite of passage for all American politicians these days. My concern is, obviously Obama and Netanyahu in private will be talking about how are they going to sell a war with Iran to the rest of the world. Because we're tired of all these lies about weapons of mass destruction and Al-Qaeda and all the rest of this cover story. that is covering up Israel's desire to be the main political power in the region and the U.S. desire to shackle Iran's oil sales only to the dollar. My concern, though, is Israel is already out there saying that Hamas is planning an attack on Obama while he visits the Temple Mount. Now, Hamas would never do anything that stupid, because Hamas right now understands they have huge support among the American people, and they're not going to do anything to sabotage that. Israel, on the other hand, could very easily decide they're going to kill Obama, blame it on the Arabs, Palestinians, Al-Qaeda, whatever. That would make Biden the president, and he's pro-Israel, more pro-Israel than Obama was. And even better, he would get to run for re-election in 2016. So if Israel were to assassinate Obama, that would restore their lock on the White House until 2020. And after last year's erosion of Israel's support in the Congress and their failure to derail Hagel's nomination, Israel is doing everything they can to reassert their complete control over the U.S. government. So that's my big concern about Obama going to Israel, is they may set him up the way they did Yitzhak Rabin, because the security around Rabin was just as tight as what is being planned to be around Obama. So that's my concern about that. Alrighty, now over in the Koreas, as you're already aware, the U.S. and Japan and South Korea are holding these heavy military exercises for, I think it's about another week. They're going to keep on going. China and Russia and North Korea are holding their exercises, and North Korea itself is obviously increasing their preparations for a possible attack. They're increasing their jet fighter activity. They're practicing mass evacuations of civilians into tunnels, which North Korea has and the U.S. does not. In the event of an attack on this country, there are no shelters for the general population. They used to have them back in the 1950s and 1960s. They're not there any longer. Or if they are, all the supplies in them have rotted to uselessness years ago. Now, yesterday, we had a report coming from the head of the U.S. intelligence community saying North Korea was fielding mobile ICBMs capable of hitting the United States of America. Now, this is pure war propaganda. North Korea's longest-range missile, the only one they have capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, is the Taepodong-2. It is not a mobile-based missile. Fixed launch sites only. It has been test-fired only once, and it blew up. Even if it was working, its maximum range with a payload will not allow it to reach anywhere in the United States of America. It would get about 90% of the way to Alaska, can't reach here in Hawaii. The U.S. is trying to claim that North Korea can just strap on some auxiliary boosters to increase the range. But unless a missile is designed from the start to take the stress of these added strap-on boosters, simply strapping boosters on there will tear the rocket apart at launch. It's not like, oh, we have a rocket, let's just add more boosters onto the side of it. The engineering doesn't work that way. And they're just trying to ramp up the war, and I'm concerned there might be a false flag to kick off war with North Korea. Not that North Korea has not been screaming and yelling and all the rest of that about threatening to attack Iceland, which I think has undermined their own credibility. But at this point, the money junkies are desperate to get this world war really cranked up and going to solve all of the private central bankers' economic problems, distract from the fact that all these problems are the fault of the private central banks. And they don't care where the war starts any longer. They're just going to set off, they could set off an atomic bomb up in Alaska or even right here in Hawaii and say, gosh darn those North Koreans, the world is going to war. And we'll be at war with Russia and China, a war that the United States ultimately cannot win, even with all of its nuclear arsenal. And you know something? Those private central banks, they don't care. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest. They love wars. They don't care which side wins or loses because both sides go into debt to fight the war, and then both sides go further into debt to rebuild from the war. And after it's all over, we, ordinary people of the world, have pretty much what we had before, except the graveyards are a lot larger, And we're back on the hook to these private central bankers for another 100 years. And that is really the agenda. Now, turning to Syria, we are seeing more and more concern that this outsourcing of regime change in Syria is going to backflash on the United States of America, because the U.S. has basically taken the attitude that they're going to hire a bunch of mercenaries, have them overthrow the government of Syria, and then these mercenaries are just going to walk out of Syria and leave it to the United States to rule. And now we're beginning to see that may not happen. These hired mercenaries, if they succeed in ousting Assad, are going to say, hey, we're the new government now, deal with it. Back after these commercials. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and the corporate media is still completely focused on the Vatican and the smoke coming out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. There's a lot of smoke, and I think there's a lot more smoke than you can explain by burning those paper ballots. And maybe they just didn't want to take any chances last time, because if you remember when Pope Benny was selected, the wind was blowing the smoke, and they didn't actually realize it was white smoke until the bells started ringing. And there's a lot of smoke. I think they've augmented the system. Maybe they threw a couple of chairs in there or something as well to make sure everybody understood that it was actually happening. So everybody's waiting for the announcement who the new pope is going to be, and the new pope has gone to the room of tears. I understand they stopped using that chair that they used to make sure that he was really a guy. Long story behind that one. We'll cover that some other time. We got more important things to talk about here today. Over in Libya, we've been talking about how the Libyan parliament has suspended its sessions as protesters continue to gather around, and apparently actually got into the parliament building. And their so-called interim president was fired on the other day. And it looks like the Libyan people absolutely do not like their new U.S.-approved government and their new installed private central bank. And there's a new story, this is coming out of antiwar.com, which the new Libyan government, which is a creation of NATO and the United States of America, is apparently providing funding to groups linked to Al-Qaeda. And it isn't that Libya is doing anything that's necessarily wrong, it's that Al-Qaeda is simply a name that has been put on these hired mercenaries who are being sent around the world to carry out covert interventions on behalf of the United States of America and to be the manufactured evil villain that we're all supposed to be afraid of. And that's why we have the United States saying, oh, Al-Qaeda's in Iran. That's the new propaganda to sell you that war. At the same time, the U.S. has been caught funding, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Al-Qaeda in Syria. And so they're not even keeping the propaganda straight. It's not consistent. And that tells us the propaganda is starting to fall apart. Because if you have all these conflicting ideas floating around in your propaganda sphere, they cancel each other out. It loses focus. As filmmakers like to say, it's losing the narrative. And we've been seeing that for quite some time, with all of these obviously contradictory claims that are being made. Now, turning back here to the United States of America and Israel's influence, we are still seeing the fallout from this last AIPAC conference. Basically saying AIPAC is in there, controlling the U.S. government and sending out American boys and American girls to these wars of conquest, which serve Wall Street bankers' purposes and Israel's purposes. People are starting to call this last conference the Doomsday Conference. And they're out there screaming about Iran, nuclear weapons, Iran, danger, threat, threat. And 10 years ago, exactly this month, in March of 2003, we were hearing the exact same claims by the exact same people regarding Iraq. And none of those warnings turned out to be true. Iraq did not have nuclear weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have germs. They didn't have chemicals. They didn't have any of that stuff. All they had was oil that they were selling for euros. How dare they do that? And so AIPAC is out here with exactly the same language. They haven't even updated the script. And they expect us, out of a sense of loyalty, to Almighty Israel, or at least to its local branch office, the United States, to believe what we're being told, to take it at face value, to never question, to never think, to never use our brains. If you use your brain, the terrorists will win. I love this little article that came out of mpacuk.org saying Israel and the USA tie the knot. And they're talking about this bill that is in Congress to declare Israel a major strategic ally. Amounts to a marriage of the two governments. I think right now we can all agree it's in a very abusive spousal relationship. And what it comes down to, if you really think about this Senate bill that's being put through there by Lindsey Graham and Menendez, Senate Resolution 65, amounts to allowing a foreign government to declare war on behalf of the United States of America. When Israel declares war on Iran, your kids are going to be sent to fight it without question. No review by the Congress, no veto by the President. Israel will decide where America's military forces go to war under that Senate Resolution 65. And of course the bill says this is all about self-defense. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel isn't defending itself. It's attacking. That's like saying that the U.S. war on Iraq was self-defense. No, it wasn't. It was an invasion. Nobody is actually really going to attack either the United States or Israel out of fear of nuclear retaliation. That's what's going on here. All right. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the eyes of the world are on the Vatican balcony, and the Vatican's marching band is marching and banding, and the Swiss Guard are putting on a parade, so there's a lot of pageantry, and the white smoke is still pouring out of the Sistine Chapel, and I think I'm right. They augmented the system to make sure, and I actually had a listener write in and say maybe they threw Pope Benny on the fire to get the extra white smoke, which would certainly solve a lot of the church's problems if he's not around any longer. Speaking of solving problems, and I hope I'm wrong here, and I probably am, but it occurs to me, what a golden opportunity for Israel right now. The brand new Pope steps out on the balcony, and Israel pops him off and plants evidence to blame the Muslims, and all of a sudden all of the world's Christians and all of the world's Muslims are at each other's throats. And Israel stands off to one side laughing themselves silly as the planet tears itself apart. So hopefully this will all go along peacefully, and the focus will remain on the problems within the church itself, the financial skullduggery, bankers hanging under the Blackfriars Bridge, and the molestation scandal. So anyway, the Swiss Guards are marching through the square, and they're building the suspense. You know, it's like the Academy Awards when the presenters just talk on and on and on, and they're waving the envelope around, and everybody in the audience is thinking the same thing. I wish they would shut up and tell us who won. So they will find out here momentarily. So let's see, we already covered Obama going to Jerusalem and the possibility of Israel whacking him to put Biden in the White House and inflame American sentiment against the Palestinians and the Arabs and the Muslims yet again. That's a recurring pattern. That's a recurring pattern. We did a flashback to that story where British intelligence basically admitted Israel itself staged the hijacking that led to the raid on Entebbe, so Israel could look heroic and victimized and demonize the Palestinians. Lavon affair, Israelis blowing up Americans and Brits in Egypt, planting evidence to frame the Egyptians, attacking the USS Liberty, trying to frame Egypt for that, and they would have gotten away with it if the ship had actually sunk. And it goes on and on and on and on. Israel lives by the false flag attack. By way of deception, thou shalt do war. That's the motto of the Mossad. Now, speaking of Israel, apparently there was a clash at one of the refugee camps near Hebron, during which Israeli forces shot and killed a young Palestinian protester. The scandal here is that the Israeli forces are using dum-dum bullets, which are prohibited by international law. Now, dum-dum is slang for any kind of an expanding round that expands on impact to maximize the damage. And they are illegal under international laws. And by coincidence, this is exactly the same kind of ammunition the Department of Homeland Security is stockpiling to potentially use against you, the American people. And we have seen the U.S. government gleefully, eagerly use weapons against the American people that are banned under international law. Going back to the assault on Waco, that church in Waco, Texas. We're coming up on the anniversary of that next month. The tear gas that was used against those women and children in that church, these people were gassed to death with this tear gas that is actually illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war. But hey, it's okay for us to use it against American citizens. It's the letter of the law, and that makes it right. Now, earlier today, the Israeli army carried out a limited incursion into southern Gaza. They basically drove across the border in an area east of Khan Yunis city, in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and armored vehicles went in and bulldozed farmlands and property. Now, Gaza is part of Palestine, and the United Nations now recognizes Palestine as its own state. And so Israel basically invaded another nation and bulldozed a bunch of farmland and property, and then skedaddled on out. And that's something else the corporate media is not going to be telling you while they're waiting to find out who's the new pope. Imagine all the bookmakers in Las Vegas are going crazy right now on those last final bets, who it is and who it wasn't. Meanwhile, apparently this locust plague in Israel is just growing. And just, you know, they're doing aerial spraying, they're trying to deal with this thing. These locusts are swarming into Israel and devastating their crops. Isn't a locust plague one of those biblical indications of God's disfavor? Kind of calls into question this whole idea that they're God's chosen, and that because they're God's chosen, they're above the laws and concerns of other nations. Maybe not. Maybe it's a message from the big guy in the sky, for those of you who subscribe to that particular view of the universe. Now, Pamela Geller is back out doing it again. She's been putting up all of these provocative propaganda posters all over the United States. Started in New York, now they're out in San Francisco, where they're out there saying killing Jews is worship. And again, it's all lies and propaganda and misquotations that are going on. And it's very interesting because Pamela Geller can put up these inflammatory posters supposedly under freedom of speech, but when Muslim groups want to put up counter posters to clarify what she's saying wrong, they're being denied because their posters are inflammatory and incitement. And it seems a very loose application of the idea of freedom of speech. And what's really interesting is if you look at Pamela Geller's posters, we have seen their kind before, all over Nazi Germany in the 1940s. The posters the Nazis were putting up to demonize the Jews and accuse them of all kinds of baseless crimes. We have seen these posters before. Pamela Geller is replaying the Nazi propaganda campaign. Only it's, instead of the Jews, obviously it's targeting the Muslims. But it's the same bovine excrement all over again. And unlike wine, it has not gotten better with age. And our current government is, yes, anything that bashes Muslims and promotes Israel, that's protected by freedom of speech. But when the Muslims try and stand up and defend themselves against these outright lies, oh, we can't let you have a public forum, that's incitement. It's criticism of Israel, and that cannot be allowed in the United States of America. Where do you think you live? The United States of America? Now, over in Iran, they have again detected U.S. spy flights crossing their territory. And they're claiming that the U.S. plane is there trying to map out Iran's radar sites. Good reason for Iran to keep most of them switched off until they're really needed. But what's really kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to, and this is coming out of Russia today. This is also something else you're not going to hear on the American corporate media while they focus on the new pope. And that is, this is coming from U.S. intelligence chief. Iran cannot produce enough highly enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon without being found out by the international community, the U.S. National Intelligence Director told Congress. He also said, as far as he can tell, Iran has not decided to build a nuclear bomb. And it really does make a lot of sense what he's saying, because Iran has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They allow inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is tasked to prevent a nation from building nuclear weapons. So every time the IAEA says, we can't find anything, but we think Iran might be building a nuclear bomb, the IAEA is basically announcing to the world, we are a total failure. We cannot do the job we are paid to do, because we can't find any evidence of nuclear weapons building in Iran, but we're convinced they still have one, when it is their job to determine one way or the other based on facts. So from now on, when the IAEA, which has become hideously biased and skewed since al-Baradei stepped down, when they're out there saying, we can't find evidence of it, but we're sure Iran is building a bomb, it maps to the IAEA is a failure. They can't do the job they are supposed to do. If Iran is building a nuclear weapon, it's the IAEA's job to find out. And if they are not, let's fire them. Save the money. And this intelligence chief is correct. Iran could, in theory, produce laboratory quantities of highly enriched uranium. Don't know why they'd bother. It's not really that useful. But to create enough highly enriched uranium for a bomb is a massive, massive enterprise. Go back and look at photos of the plants that the U.S. used to build their nuclear bombs. They're gigantic, 700-acre facilities. You can't hide this sort of thing in a closet. You can underneath the reactors at Dimona, Israel. Apparently they've gotten away with that. But it's a massive, massive undertaking to highly enrich uranium. That centrifuge plant that Iran has to make fuel rods for their power station is very large, but not large enough to produce weapons-grade uranium in practical amounts. It's not like the kitchen blender where there's a dial that says power station nuclear weapon. You flip it over and it just automatically starts doing that. It is a massive difference in scale. Iran is enriching to 20%. Nuclear bombs take anywhere between 93 to 95% enrichment. And it's not a linear process. The higher the enrichment goes, the more and more energy and facilities it takes. And again, go back and look at the U.S. enrichment facilities leading to America's bomb program. They're gigantic. Cannot be hidden from satellites. Certainly cannot be hidden from IAEA inspectors who are given access to all these facilities. So the IAEA, when they're out there saying, we think Iran has a bomb, but we can't find it, they're basically proclaiming to the world they are complete and utterly worthless failures at their job. Let's fire them. Let's get rid of them. They're not doing the job they claim to be doing. Now, up again in Afghanistan, Karzai is going out and continuing his claim that the Taliban warlords who are continuing to carry out attacks inside Afghanistan are working for the U.S. government in order to create a situation where the United States will have an excuse to keep U.S. military troops in Afghanistan after the end of 2014. The latest in a long series of promises by Obama to bring our kids home, going all the way back to 2008.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
Which explains why the banks are in such trouble. The U.S. is going to want to keep their troops inside Afghanistan until it runs out of oil and runs out of opium. And because poppies are forever, that's an open-ended deal. Now, down in Venezuela, questions are still circulating about just how it is that Hugo Chavez got his cancer at pretty much the same time so many other of South America's anti-imperialism leaders came down ill. And now they're talking about a more thorough autopsy on his body and a full investigation. And basically they're going to start look at, was he poisoned? And they're going to really go in and start looking at that very, very closely. And Maduro is saying they're going to convene a commission of the world's best scientists to investigate whether Chavez had been assassinated. That's quite a contrast to the Warren Commission that was formed after Kennedy's assassination. There were no scientists on it. There were politicians like Gerald Ford, the former head of the CIA, the very man that Kennedy had fired after the Bay of Pigs, was on the Warren Commission. And, of course, John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, president of the World Bank, was on the Warren Commission. Which tells you right there, this was all about covering it up, what's really going on. Now, our stock market has been dancing between the red and the green all day. It's just slightly in the green. And it raises an interesting question. Science fiction writers for years have been warning about the day that computers will rule the world. And you know, in a very real way, it's already happening, because what we're seeing on the stock market is less and less about human investors going in and buying and selling stocks, and it's more and more about these high-frequency traders and these brokerages, which even if they don't have the high-frequency connection to the stock market, they're using computers to make their buy and sell orders. And so computers are already running the world's financial systems. And their sole purpose is to generate more profits without any other consideration. So in that context, we already live in a world being run by computers. And we can see the results of it just by looking around our own hometowns. And by the incredible disparity between this soaring stock market and the reality of economic hardship for the American people. And when we start talking about the blueprint for the new America, I think the stock market has to go back to what it was originally supposed to be, a venue for ordinary workers to partake of the nation's productivity, and not this giant open-air computer-driven casino that is being skewed for political gain and financial gain. And I think we need to start saying we need to take back control of our nation's economy from these computers, because they're doing great for the computer's owners and not very good for the nation and its people. Now, apparently, it is now being confirmed, subsidies to the main Wall Street banks in this country are approaching $800 billion per year. That's the only thing holding the system up. The foundation has collapsed. They've latched a crane onto the top of the American economy, trying to hold it up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the cameras are still on the balcony at Vatican City, and they're saying any moment the new pope will be announced. I've been saying that for about 10 minutes. They're building the drama. They're building the drama. The crawl at the bottom is saying the Pope is being fitted for his new robes. Like, I guess they have a rack back there with papal robes for the sizes of all the cardinals, just so they've got that covered. But the world is watching, the world is watching. And it's becoming actually anti-climactic at this point here. Getting back to the economy, we're seeing this out of Newsmax. Apparently yesterday, Obama came out and said he's not going to work for a balanced budget just for the sake of balance. And he said his real goal for the next 10 years, Barack, you've only got 4, less than 4. He wants to work to expand the nation's economy, which sounds good. We're all for expansion and growth until you remember that under the Federal Reserve system of economics, where all currency is put into circulation as a loan at interest, expansion and growth means increasing the aggregate debt. Obama, with his comment yesterday, has just admitted the U.S. government cannot get its spending under control. So he's going to go back to borrow and spend and borrow and spend and borrow and spend to leave future generations to deal with the accumulating debt. Just as we here today are trying to deal with the accumulated debt of the last 100 years of this Ponzi scheme banking system. For all the talk about sequestration and cuts to social services and austerity, they still can't solve the problem, because they won't face up to what the problem really is. There is no 11th marble. And for those of you who don't know what I mean by that, there is an article in the little tiny sub-menu permanently at the top of whatreallyhappened.com that is called that, the 11th marble. And you need to go read that and share it with your friends. And the basic theory of that is any 5-year-old child knows that if you put 10 marbles into a tin can, you can only take 10 marbles out. But private central bankers believe they can put 10 marbles or $10 into a tin can or an economy and magically get 11 marbles or $11 back out. And it can't work. And it never has. None of these private central banks have ever sustained. They plunge their preyed upon nations into permanent unpayable debt in order to make them permanent unfreeable slaves, until the bank comes crashing down, or you have a leader with the moral courage of an Andrew Jackson who'll shut it down and is willing to risk being assassinated for that, which fortunately did not work in the case of Andrew Jackson, but apparently did work in the cases of Abraham Lincoln, his greenbacks, and John F. Kennedy, Executive Order 11110. So now we have, after all the screaming and yelling about balancing the budget and controlling the debt, Obama is saying, can't work. We're going to go back to doing what we were doing before. Back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about the U.S. economy and waiting for them to finally tell us who the new pope is. They're building the drama. They're milking this for everything they can get. Now, apparently, Intrade, the world's largest prediction market, has shut down suddenly, leaving just a message on their website saying it was due to circumstances recently discovered. They basically pulled the plug on all trading activity. And they shut down as of March 10th to mitigate any further risks to members' accounts. What do they know that we don't know? But it's a very alarming situation. Now, it could very well be that Intrade began to realize that they cannot be selling future trades in an era where high-frequency trading and the plunge protection team are skewing the market. And that's a problem for anybody who's in the stock market who's trying to play by the rules or even analyze the market by the rules. The rules are being broken blatantly and flagrantly. And it's very alarming that this institution has all of a sudden pulled the plug. Circumstances recently discovered. We'll find out what that means somewhere down the road. Over at Investment Watch blog, they're underscoring something we've been saying on the show for quite some time. The U.S. economy is in fact not growing. While the stock market may be soaring, the U.S. economy is not growing. All this newly created wealth from the Federal Reserve, money that is still technically a loan to the American people through the U.S. government, is being poured onto Wall Street to prop it up, and it's not helping the rest of the nation at all. And it's a reminder, every single policy decision by the U.S. federal government since the crisis began back in 2007 has been exactly the wrong thing relative to what would be good for the nation and its people. The U.S. government tried to solve the banking crisis by taking trillions of dollars from the American people and give it to the banks so the banks could turn around and loan that money back to the American people at interest. That's what these bailouts were. If the government had done exactly the opposite, if they had taken trillions of dollars away from these fraudulent criminal Wall Street firms and distributed among the American people, nobody would have missed a mortgage payment. There wouldn't be a mortgage crisis or a real estate crisis. Americans would have bought brand new American cars. There wouldn't have been a need for an automotive industry bailout. We would have all gone down to the shopping malls and bought brand new American-made LED light bulbs. There wouldn't be a retail crisis or a U.S. manufacturing crisis. Nobody would be behind on their taxes. The U.S. government did the wrong thing. They failed, they failed, they failed, they failed. Iceland did the right thing. Even the IMF is now saying Iceland did the right thing. Throw the crooked bankers in prison, fire the government that helped them loot the people, write off all the debt that was created through fraud and manipulation, and restart the system. And Iceland is doing really well. But our government is totally co-opted, not just by Israel, but by Wall Street financial interests. And let's be honest, there's a huge amount of overlap there. And every decision they have made has been great for Wall Street and bad for the United States of America. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And they're still building the drama. Any minute, the Pope will emerge. And they're showing the faces of the crowd in the square before the Vatican. And it's an impressive place if you ever get a chance to visit there. Alrighty, let's see. Getting back to the economy. Over at Investment Watch blog, we're seeing articles where gold is being strongly influenced by technicals, which is a very polite way of saying what we've all known for quite some time. The price of gold is being manipulated. It's being manipulated by dumping physical gold on the market, and when they started running out of physical gold, they started keeping the gold prices down with these gold futures contracts. And when they came due, those people who demanded physical delivery, because that's, after all, what the contract was about, these gold paper traders started leasing gold from the New York Federal Reserve in order to not collapse the commodities market. And that's why all these private central depositories, the New York Federal Reserve, Bank of France, Bank of England, are scrambling now that countries whose gold bullion is inside those vaults are starting to say, we want to count it, we want to see it, we want to test it, make sure there's no tungsten in there, and in many cases saying, we want it back. We want it under our own control. Now, over in Italy, Beppe Grillo, whose five-star movement won the largest share of votes in last month's election, said in an interview in the German media, for all intents and purposes, Italy is already out of the euro. And he says the other European Union countries are going to try and keep Italy in the euro until they can get back the funds their central bank invested in Italian government banks. He says as soon as they can get their money, they'll drop Italy like a hot potato. Well, Grillo doesn't really understand that under the European Central Bank, that money can never ever really be paid back. That's the trap. But he's already thinking about Italy being out of the euro. We're hearing that from more and more of the European countries. And remember, the first time a European country leaves the euro, leaves the eurozone, that's going to trigger all of those credit default swaps. Wall Street sold recklessly. Something like $90 trillion in exposure on European debt. And these Wall Street firms, just like AIG, did not keep the cash reserves necessary to pay claims on those credit default swaps. The attitude is, well, these are never going to come due. Let's just take the money and write ourselves huge bonuses and whatever. Again, over at Investment Watch blog, they're basically saying that these gold and silver ETFs, the paper trading, silver and gold, are backed only by the good faith of the banks and brokerages. In other words, these gold and silver paper contracts do not have adequate physical backing. They basically run it the way banks handle their day-to-day cash. They only have enough gold and silver on hand to cover reasonably expected requests for physical delivery. And the rest of it's all just make-believe. The instant there's a gold or silver run, it's all going to start coming apart, because the instant one of these ETF dealers, brokerages, collapses, everybody's going to panic and say, I want my gold and silver now. I don't care if it's unallocated or allocated, I want it here right now. It has to break at some point. Okay, they're announcing the new Pope, and I'm not seeing the name yet, but he's out there on the balcony. Everybody's okay. Here we go. We have a Pope. We knew that, and he's saying basically, he's going through a lot of the formal whatever, announcing that we have a Pope, and everybody's waiting for the name. And he's now just bowed and left again. They are milking this here. All right, back to the U.S. economy. We've got more important things to talk about. We are now seeing, and this is coming out of WallStreetPit.com, and it's commenting on Walmart's slowness to restock their shelves. And we mentioned this before. The decline in consumer spending is starting to dry up revenue to the point where retailers' supply chains are now being impacted. And according to this report, the Walmart's inability to keep their stores supplied is starting to deteriorate. A lot of empty shelves, and of course that's accelerating the slump in sales. People are going into these stores, they're not finding what they want to find. They're not going to buy what Walmart wants to sell them on special today. And the stores are running out, and new stuff is not coming in. And we're seeing this in a lot of these large chain retailers. And this is a sign the consumer economy is really starting to collapse. The retailer economy is starting to collapse. But the stock market is up. That makes everything all hunky-dory. But the reality is, and this is coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain, the cost of living has risen 4 times faster than pay scales over the last 5 years. And that's not only true just in Great Britain, it's happening here in the United States of America. We're seeing it every time we go to the supermarket, to our gas station. Prices are going up, and our ability to pay is not keeping pace. And that means a declining standard of living. And that is always what happens with austerity and over-government borrowing and over-government spending and slavery to private central banks. So the United States is now slipping into the same economic malaise that we are seeing in Greece and Italy and France and Spain. It is happening right here, right now, right before your very eyes, here on our show tonight. Now, CNBC is back to warning about the pensions time bomb being on the horizon. And they're saying that right now, according to their figures, okay, the new Pope is Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, and they have not announced his new name. So we didn't get the American Pope, we didn't get the Irish or the Black Pope, and I'm a little surprised. I thought they might elect an American as a political device to blunt all of these child molestation lawsuits, because most of the losses from those lawsuits have been here in the United States of America. So now we have the new Pope, and we can get on to some other things. So we're back to talking about CNBC, the pension time bomb on the horizon, and according to their calculations, U.S. companies have a $400 billion pension deficit on their books. They have contractually committed to their employees to provide a pension on retirement, and they are short the money necessary to do so by $400 billion. How did this happen? Because if you're on a company pension plan, usually you're paying into it, payroll deduction, and the employee puts in their portion. Well, what happened is that money put in by the employer and the employee was sent off to a pension fund, which by law is only allowed to invest in AAA rated securities. And here we go back to 2008 and the mortgage-backed security fraud, where Wall Street's top rating agencies, except for Egan-Jones, who has now been banned from doing any more ratings by the SEC, were giving these fraudulent mortgage bundles AAA ratings, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. The mortgage-backed security bubble broke, the fraud was exposed, and that's the reason all of these pension funds are defunded. They lost tons and tons of your money on these fraudulent mortgage bundles that the Wall Street rating agencies claimed were AAA. And that's what's going on. Going to grab a phone call. Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
My name is Michael, and so is yours, which means like he who is like unto God. Your last name is Rivero. Okay.
Well, that's boy, did they screw that one up. You know. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, Michael, there's a higher dollar, a strong dollar, which may mean nervousness, like the safety. There is pressure on gold, and we have a market at all-time highs. Can you make any sense of this?
Yeah, it's basically all fraud and illusion. As I was just reporting a little earlier in the show, everybody understands the stock market is going up to new heights, and the manipulated U.S. currency is being made to look as positive as possible as part of that campaign to discourage the world from seeking a new international trade and reserve currency. But again, the U.S. economy outside Wall Street and outside the Beltway of Washington, D.C. is obviously not doing well at all. Massive unemployment, massive food stamp assistance, hunger, starvation, crumbling infrastructure. They're propping up America's financial system in the eyes of the world, and it's all an illusion. And they're struggling to keep the rest of the world from turning away from the dollar. That's why they launched war on Iraq. Iraq was selling their oil for euros. That's why they launched war on Libya. Libya decided to have a state central bank and a value-based currency, the gold dinar, that the rest of Africa was saying that's much more attractive and reliable than the U.S. dollar. It's all about the dollarification of the world, forcing the world back onto Bretton Woods at the point of a sword.
So it's not necessarily other countries, purchasing the dollar and making its price go higher necessarily. Because what about this currency war? How does all this play?
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Mike, stay on the phone. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the new Pope is Pope Francis. And apparently this is the first Pope from South America, so at least it's in the hemisphere. And he's going to have a heck of a job. I don't envy him the job at all. He's going to have to clean up this mess that Pope Benny has left behind. And wish him good luck, because he's got a heck of a fire to put out there. Anyway, getting back to Mike in Chicago, first of all governments and all central banks manipulate their currency, and there are two agendas at work that are diametrically opposed to each other. First of all, governments would like their currency to be devalued in order to boost their export market, to make their products more financially attractive to the rest of the world. In the case of the United States, that's a problem because our manufacturing has basically declined. America doesn't make quality products other nations want. Even our military exports are coming under criticism following the debacle of the F-22 and the F-35. And the other agenda is, of course, those people who have large amounts of wealth denominated in U.S. dollars do not want those dollars devalued because they, like most Americans, are dependent on imported products. You know, the fine status symbol cars that announce to the world you have arrived are mostly made in Europe. And so those two agendas are fighting back and forth against each other. And you have foreign investors who don't want the U.S. dollar devalued because it makes their wealth shrink. And it's a very complicated, interlocked issue. But the United States has, 2 times in recent memory, artificially devalued the dollar in an attempt to boost exports. And the last one was back in, I think, the 1990s, and it really didn't work. So that's kind of what's going on there. And because we know there's so much manipulation going on, we're still reeling from the scandal of the LIBOR rigging. It's hard to say whether the U.S. dollar is really worth what we're being told that it is. And I think there's certainly a tremendous motive for the U.S. government to try and present the dollar as still strong and valuable. And again, this goes back to the idea of maintaining the dollar as the world's preferred global trade and reserve currency, and to protect it from, like, the Chinese yuan, which is being suggested as a replacement currency. We've seen a lot of countries around the world saying it's time for the dollar to step down and allow some other currency to take over global finance. And the U.S. obviously does not want that to happen because there's a huge economic advantage for being the world's global reserve and trade currency. And it goes, again, all the way back to Bretton Woods. And had the Federal Reserve System not abused that advantage of being the world's global currency, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in right now. But bankers, money junkies, are what they are, and they tried to maximize their immediate profits and basically undermined world trust in the U.S. economy. And all of the artificially inflated stock market and dollar value and the rest of it isn't going to really convince anybody. Once they look at the United States outside the Beltway and Wall Street, they'll see how poorly the U.S. economy is doing right now. Mike, are you there? I guess.
Sure. I think this is a great opportunity soon to buy gold in physical.
Absolutely.
And this is going to protect your labor and what you have toiled, with creating something of with labor and work as opposed to derivatives and leverage, and getting bailed out because you're too big. Because I know Michael Rivero and myself, Mike, it isn't too big to fail. We're too little to lose.
I like that. That's a good phrase.
Yeah. And this is going to be a great opportunity, I think, and I think we should keep that in mind. What's coming next or down the road, I think there's going to be a loss of confidence. I lost confidence years ago, haven't you?
Yeah, it's already in progress. It's already in progress. That's why there is all this fraud and manufactured illusion to try and bolster the reputation of the dollar, the brand of the dollar. And the world is beginning to realize it's all brand and all public relations and all illusion, and there really is nothing behind it. Again, the big mistake that this nation made, and this goes all the way back to the end of World War II, is we created a corporate culture with no respect for manufacturing. And that is why the priority of the nation shifted to financial activity, playing with the money as the business of the nation. We stopped making products to make money. We made money the product. We incentivized fraud and financial manipulation at the same time we were disincentivizing the workers. And no workers are going to work hard and produce a quality product if they don't feel appreciated. And that appreciation is expressed not only financially, paying them for their quality work, but also simply rewarding them and saying, we understand that what you do is the foundation of our entire nation's economy. But because of the MBA phenomenon, Harvard Business School, scientific business management, we created a corporate culture that is not emotionally connected with the process of making actual products to sell. And that was a tremendous sociological mistake. Got to let you go here, Mike. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I don't care who the new pope is. Still, if we look to the Catholic Church, there's no hope.
I would agree. And like I said earlier, I do not envy the man his job. We actually just had a listener write in saying, why do the popes have to be elected so old? I heard some commentators earlier saying that certain ones were out because they were in their early 60s and that was too young. I don't know, maybe it's because the other cardinals still want a shot at the throne. If I elect this old guy, he may die in a couple of years and I'll be back. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes there. Anyway, anything else on your mind?
Well, yeah, it's even like somebody in Russia told me in their local paper about Obamacare that, because with the new full-time, say if a worker works over 30 hours, they get penalized.
Yes.
Now, and it's starting to hurt businesses. It's starting to hurt businesses that not only that is like they can't keep up with the clientele because they got to let go of a worker early that is needed. And also, too, it's like the shrinking paychecks because of this. And
that's absolutely right. And, of course, these are the people that Walmart can no longer lure into their store to buy whatever it is they're selling, and that's why Walmart is collapsing. And, again, go ahead.
Well, here's the good news is, like, even some towns in Texas and certain counties nationwide are saying, we're not going along with it. And they're just ignoring it. And they're basically, and what this impression is, what she told me was Obama is starting to lose control of the people. He can no longer scare them. He can no longer make threats. I think people about had it.
When people get to the point where they have nothing left to lose, that's when they get courageous. The American culture has been held together through the threat of taking away your accumulated wealth. We'll come in with civil forfeiture if you do something we don't like. We'll come in, we'll sick the IRS on you if you don't do what we like. But when people have been driven down to the point where they're living hand to mouth and they don't have anything left to lose, that threat stops being useful for social control. It's obviously keeping the money junkies in line, but the money junkies only account for 1% of the American population. And everybody else really has reached the breaking point where, like it says in the Declaration of Independence, people are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. But when a long chain of abuses and usurpations, evincing a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right to throw off such government. We're at that point again. And what's really killing this nation, it's not just Obamacare. That's just the latest insult. It's all the taxation. At a time when the American people are struggling to stay above water, just barely, the government's solution is to shove a hose down our throats and turn the faucet on full blast. One of our members over in the chat room was commenting on how in their state, the state government has now passed a law where even if you give a car to somebody, like you have an old car, you don't want to bother selling it, you're just going to give it to them, the person you give it to still has to pay the full sales tax on what the car's assessed value is. And what's killing this country is the taxation. What's driving businesses to other countries is taxation.
Well, we no longer have taxation without equal representation. We have taxation
we lost that long ago. Yeah, I like that, taxation without hesitation. No, we lost representation, back when the vote fraud started getting completely out of control, and back when Citizens United passed, and this unrestrained lobbying activity in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is nothing but a giant open-air shopping mall for the selling of influence and power to the highest bidder. We've got levels of corruption in the United States matching that of Rome just before its collapse.
No, we even found out, too, one of the small towns in Texas, it's like now people are starting to catch on as these police chiefs and city council getting this federal money, and people are starting to go in these city council meetings starting to slap them down and say, you will not accept one dime of federal money. We just need to do that at the school board.
It's not just money. We're getting stories now, when we're talking about the gun grabbing that's going on, we're hearing stories where representatives of the Obama administration or just Democrats in general are literally threatening local officials to go along with gun confiscation or there'll be political or financial consequences. If you don't grab the guns, we'll take away your funding for whatever. And I mean, that's how open this is. They're clearly panicking. They know they have pushed the American people to the point where the unrest that we're seeing in Greece and Spain and Italy and France is going to happen here. And the difference is 80% of the American people carry guns. And that's what they're really afraid of.
Well, the thing is, I don't buy into the matrix of what the press tells, because I just say one thing. The Federal Reserve is going to print money out of their way out of existence, and the federal government's going to tax us out of its own existence.
That very much so. I mean, did you hear what Mayor Bloomberg was saying the other day, that the economy is not in trouble because we can borrow money to infinity? Yeah, you can do that, and you're going to wind up like Zimbabwe, where everybody's carrying around paper notes that say $100 trillion on them.
We have starving trillionaires in Zimbabwe.
That's exactly right. We have starving trillionaires down there. I think they've got like $200 U.S. left in their national treasury. And, you know, this $100 trillion note from Zimbabwe is worth about $4 U.S. I was showing it to the tellers down at my bank the other day. Said, this is where we're going to wind up. This is where we're going to wind up.
Well, you know, Mike, a good thing I'm starting my own, like, little shop, wood shop.
Good.
With bandsaws, joiners, and all that stuff. And I'm going to allow, like, a person, like, for $5 a day, they can go use the shop and build things.
Okay, now, you have insurance coverage for that? Because there's a huge liability. If the instant somebody hurts themselves in your shop, the lawyers are going to go into a feeding frenzy. So be very careful about that.
They're going to sign a waiver.
Okay.
They cut up their own hand. They're up. I'll just dial 911. That's about it. That's my own responsibility.
Well, put a tourniquet on there. Put a tourniquet. At least put a tourniquet on there, okay?
Yeah.
All righty. My goodness. Let's see. Another phone call. Ramsey in California. Aloha, Ramsey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you so much for creating that article, All Wars Are Banker Wars. It's the first thing I've found that I think I'll make my stepson watch, and I think it might change his mind because he's currently wants to go into the military. So I'm hoping that does. Anyway, it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. My next thing is I'm curious what you think of Bitcoin, and if you think that's a threat at all to the knuckleheads at the top. My last question is do you think the moon landing was real or a hoax?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, first of all, in answer to your first concern, I would discourage any young people from going into the military right now. First of all, the government is not treating our military very well, especially after they come home and are no longer able to go out and kill the designated bad guys. Second, we know there's a lot of chemical experimentation going on. Those troops, we know they're being doped up on antidepressants, which are leading to all kinds of problems after they come back home. And again, you are not defending the United States of America against a foreign aggressor. You are the invader and the conqueror to grab wealth that does not belong to the United States of America and bring it back over into the U.S. That's the real job. These are invading forces. They're not defending the United States of America from anything. They are projecting power. They are reimposing Bretton Woods on the rest of the world. They're propping up a failed governmental system and a failed banking system on the point of a bayonet. That's what's going on there. Now, regarding Bitcoin, Bitcoin, when you talk about it as an electronic means of communicating wealth, well, that's been around for a long time with the bank's EFT system. I'm still concerned about its present constitution as a currency that could be open to manipulation. And apparently they've had a systemic breakdown. We're going to talk about that later in the show. As far as the Apollo moon landings go, that's a dead issue now. Foreign space probes have now imaged the remains of the lunar module on the surface of the moon. This idea that the Apollo moon landings were faked is part of the propaganda the government puts onto the independent media and the internet so the corporate media can ridicule them and say, oh, look, those loonies don't believe the Apollo moon landings actually happened. And there's a lot of that stuff out there. Alien spaceships, this and that. And that's all they know how to do. And in the case of the Apollo moon landings, time and technology has caught up with that fraud. There are foreign governments who do not like the United States of America who have said, yeah, they were really there, and here are the images to prove it. Now, second of all of those Apollo landing sites left something on the surface called the ALSEP, the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiment Package, and one of the devices left at all those landing sites was the LRRR, the Lunar Ranging Retroreflector, the laser ranging retroreflectors. That's what the acronym stood for. And it's basically just a giant high-tech version of a highway reflector that sends light back to the same direction it came in from. It's these wonderful little quartz corner cube prisms. And anybody on Earth with a telescope and the appropriate equipment can bounce laser signals off of those devices and get the exact distance to the moon and its exact velocity relative to planet Earth. And universities all over the world are using them. I used them myself when I was at Table Mountain Observatory. So it is beyond question they are up there. And for all the money that was spent on developing the Saturn V and all these spaceships, why not go to the moon? It's absurd. But again, this kind of stuff, no plane at the Pentagon, fake Apollo moon landings, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster's love child, is deliberate propaganda seeded onto the internet and the independent media in order to give the corporate media an easy handle to ridicule those who are getting too close to the truth. I'll give you another one from a way back during the Kennedy assassination. There was that talk about the Umbrella Man right next to the motorcade and how the umbrella had a dart gun. And sure enough, during the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they brought in the umbrella and they joked about it. Don't point that thing at me. How silly those conspiracy theorists. They believed in the umbrella dart gun. Well, actually, nobody out here really did. It was just manufactured. And in the end, it didn't work because based on the acoustic evidence, the House Select Committee on Assassinations had to admit there was at least a second shooter in Dealey Plaza. So a lot of the stuff that's out here that you think is completely ridiculous, like the no plane at the Pentagon theory, yeah, it's supposed to be ridiculous. And it's part of the government disinformation operation. But at this point with, again, foreign nations' probes to the moon have seen the remains of the lunar module and the rover and the ALSET packages, and even the footprints are showing up in the images. You know, this idea that the Apollo moon landings were a hoax, that's a piece of dead propaganda, and it should go into the propaganda shredding machine. All right, another phone call. Ed in Connecticut. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike, again. This is a question about the military. How come the military doesn't wake up and all our armed forces go to the Washington and rip these people right out of where they are and get them under control? And another question is, we have Fox News with Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and all that, and we know that Rupert Murdoch, he belongs to the Council of Foreign Affairs. Is there a problem there? And the other thing is, I've been telling people about your website, and also I had one that she saw it once and she was so scared she didn't want to see it anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
Oh.
You know, there were a lot of people in Germany didn't want to face up to what was obviously going wrong as the Nazis came to power.
Right.
Okay, so as far as the military, I know there are a lot of people in the military who are very unhappy with things. We know back in 1933 there was actually an attempt by the Wall Street bankers to provoke a military coup against Roosevelt. And it involved Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, who pretended to go along with the plan, then ratted them out to Roosevelt. And the only reason Roosevelt didn't arrest those bankers is they sat there and said, look, you arrest any one of us, we'll crash the economy. Your New Deal would be dead on arrival. So these things have been happening before. We know that the last several presidential administrations have been urging independently thinking military leaders to resign. We know that Obama right now is only promoting military leaders who are willing to fire on the American people. And so Obama is already trying to make sure the military isn't going to stand up to him, at least at the level of the officer corps. There may well be military leaders considering a takeover of the federal government. That may be the reason we had this flurry of homes blowing up with no explanation about a month ago. But I know most of the military people I talk to are, in fact, strict constitutionalists, and they are not at all happy with the idea that they signed up to serve the military of the United States of America to protect us from enemies, and now they're being hired out as mercenaries to the Wall Street bankers and to Israel. They're not happy with that at all. Anything else?
From Vietnam, and I feel like I've been used just as much as the other guys that are on that wall in Washington. What a shame, you know?
Yeah. Well, again, and if you go back to that article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, the money... the money junkies will not hesitate to murder 100 million human beings to keep their wealth and power. That's just the cost of doing business.
And how come you can't get mercenaries to take them out?
You got the money for it? You're being outbid.
Somebody has.
Mercenaries go to the highest bidder, and the money junkies are the highest bidder. That's unfortunately a big part of the problem right now.
Okay, what about Rupert Murdoch and O'Reilly and Hannity and Fox News? How truthful are they becoming?
Not very, but then it's hardly confined to Fox News.
I know that.
It's a problem with the American corporate media as a whole. They are beholding to their corporate masters. They are obedient to their main advertisers like Monsanto, and all of the American corporate media are infiltrated by American intelligence agencies, either the CIA through Operation Mockingbird or whatever its current incarnation is, and of course, pro-Israel people are very much prominent in the entertainment media industries, and that's just an absolute reality.
Well, the only reason I bring that up, I watch Greta's show, and she had Hillary on there, and she likes to give all the congressmen and senators a hard time, but she never asked her about Benghazi or anything about that. And it annoys me because, you know, she's really tough on some of these senators, and all of a sudden she just flopped down.
Yeah, well, you see that. The idea is they don't want to risk access to these political stars, and so they'll back off the hardball questions. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Back to the phones. Corey in Texas. Aloha, Corey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Appreciate you taking my call. Well, I just kind of wanted to put out there at you guys that here in Texas, the DFW area, Grand Prairie to be exact, on April 6th, we're holding this constitutional liberty kind of an event. And we got a bunch of good speakers, and I'm hoping a bunch of people come out. We have about 200 or 300 people who have already RSVP'd. And we're going to be speaking about things like nullification in Texas. Jay Stang from Oath Keepers is going to be there. He's going to be speaking about history of gun control. Terry Hall from TURF will be there. She's going to be speaking about our freedom to travel is at risk, about what the government's doing with the tollways and all that good stuff. Frank Kuchar, even some of the Republican elected officials like Jonathan Stickland and some of the other ones will be there. But, you know, I think we need to be having events like these weekly and stuff, and people just need to be coming together and standing together for liberty. That's the name of the event. It's called Standing Together for Liberty. And you can look it up on Facebook and join in if you want. We'll have live music there, and I just didn't know if there was a way, you know, Republican Broadcasting Network could get there, or if anybody was in Texas.
Oh, that would be a really good thing. Unfortunately, I'm in Hawaii, and my travel budget is zero. So, but yeah, one more time, if you would repeat where and when this is taking place.
It's Saturday, April 6th. It's at Quick Trip Park, the minor league baseball field, Quick Trip Park in Grand Prairie, Texas. And it's going to be from about noon to 4 p.m. It's free to the public. I paid for the venue out of pocket myself, and I want this to be free to the public so everybody and anybody can show up. We have libertarian candidates there. We have Republican candidates there. We have constitutional people there. And we're just all coming together, and we're going to stand together for liberty. And there's going to be a bunch of great speakers there, probably about 12 of them. And you can see on the Facebook event page, if you go to Standing Together for Liberty, you can check it out and get all the information there. We're going to have live music from the FNAs, which is kind of like a reggae.
Okay, we're almost out of time here, and good luck, and I hope listeners will make a point of getting over there. And Corey, do me a favor, take a bunch of pictures, and after it's all over, send them to me, and we'll put up a little page here at whatreallyhappened.com, okay?
I really appreciate your time, Mike. Thank you. God bless.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. Getting back again to the economy over at This Is Money in Great Britain. They're basically saying British workers have suffered the sharpest wage fall of any developed country. As business leaders warn, the pain is far from over. And Great Britain, just like the U.S., just like every nation with a private central bank, is saying we've got to loot the people to prop up the Ponzi scheme banks. That's the only solution they can think of. I'm sure that you probably can think of some others. And apparently over in Iran, they have actually sentenced these 4 bankers caught committing fraud to death. That's an idea whose time has come. Beheadings instead of bailouts. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And let's see. Now, getting back to the economy. Over in Italy, we were talking before how Beppe Grillo is saying that basically Italy is on its way out of the Eurozone anyway. The central bank wants their money back from Italy's banks, and other than that, they've lost all interest. So, now we're hearing that Italy's austerity plan, which was supposed to help the bankers, has pretty much destroyed the rest of their economy and tumbled them into one of the worst recessions of any Eurozone country. And businesses are going under at the rate of 1,000 a day, especially among small and mid-sized companies that represent the backbone of Italy's economy. And that is a shift in consciousness we need to embrace, because our corporate media is always talking about the nation's economic health in terms of the big corporations, the Monsantos, the Goldman Sachs, who are doing very well. But in the United States of America, the majority of new job creation was always in these small and mid-sized businesses, and they are being hammered. And so, again, the indications are that all of these governments with all these private central banks are doing what helps them at the expense of ordinary people. And I'm sure it is an article of faith inside Wall Street and Washington, D.C. that there's still plenty of wealth out here in the hinterland. They just have to figure a way to cheat us out of it, or tax us out of it, or scam us out of it, and all will be well. But we all know that wealth is finite. Real wealth. Not the paper money the Federal Reserve is pouring out to keep everything propped up. But the real wealth that holds a nation's economy together is drying up. And what's happened in Europe is happening here. And the corporate media is going to tell you, oh, no, it's different here. There's no reason to get upset. You know, we're doing our best. Yeah, they're doing their best for themselves, is what they're doing. Now, the other day we were talking about how people all across Europe are now having to rely on the Red Cross for food packages. And as a matter of fact, right now the Red Cross is handing out more of these poverty parcels than after the end of World War II. That is pretty shaming, I think, to any government in Europe right now. And it's shaming here in the government of the United States of America that we have more people on food stamps than the entire population of Spain. And they're going to tell you everything is fine, there's no reason to get upset, there's no reason to be angry, we're working to solve the problem, and they aren't. Everything they have done was 180 degrees out of phase with what would have worked for the nation and its people as a whole. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and we're seeing that right in front of us right now. Now, interestingly enough, Germany was one of the strongest supporters of the formation of the Eurozone, the European Union, and the single currency. They were one of the first ones in there saying this would be a really good idea. But now, after having paid the costs of that predatory European Central Bank, Euroscepticism is now sweeping Germany. And more of the German people are saying, enough of this. We are suffering for the bank failures of other countries. Why should we do that any longer? Merkel is facing more and more opposition on that agenda. Back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about Europe. We're talking about Germany, that is now having second thoughts about the European Union and the wisdom of a single currency issued as a loan at interest by a private central bank. And as I've mentioned before, if you want a model for what the European Union is financially, think of a single giant boat with a seat for every one of the member nations. And there are 11 holes in the bottom of that boat and only 10 corks. And everything that they're doing really amounts to yanking a cork from one hole and pounding it into another hole in full view of the press cameras while screaming, "We're working to solve the problem." But the water is still coming in, and the boat is still sinking, and Germany is tired of having the cork in the hole under their seat constantly being tugged out to fix these other nations. Now, interestingly enough, over at the Daily Mail in Great Britain, they're already starting to point the finger of blame for this coming crash at Germany. It's all Germany's fault. They're saying, oh, if Germany pulls out of the Eurozone, their plan is to become a new empire, bigger and more powerful than ever. They're taking their gold back from the New York Federal Reserve and the Bank of France, so they're going to have a gold-backed Deutschmark. We can't have that. So the world has been brought to the edge of a new global war by the predations of the private central banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest, and they're going to point the finger of blame at Germany. Why? Well, it worked the last 2 times. They're grasping at straws. They really, really are. Now, I think, as of right now, this moment, the new Pope's honeymoon just ended because already stories are surfacing from his tenure down there in Argentina, where apparently back he was involved or accused of being involved in the 1976 kidnapping of 2 priests. So I was already saying Pope Francis I, okay, well, at least he wasn't a member of the Nazi Youth Corps, but it looks like he's coming into Vatican City with a great deal of baggage already in his record. So, right now I imagine he's in the Pauline Chapel for his private little chat with God, and he's saying, why me? Because he's inherited such a mess from his predecessors. But apparently he's got his own dark past, which is not going to surface. I guarantee you it will surface here. Now, up in New York, there's been another shooting, and they're hunting for the suspect. 6 people believed to be shot. 4 of them have died. And they're basically looking. These are up in Herkimer and Mohawk villages. Herkimer is rather famous for these very strange quartz crystals they have there that are called Herkimer diamonds. Rather interesting geology there. Now, Michael Boyson has been captured. This is the guy who was let out of jail for burglarizing pharmacies, went to his grandparents where they threw him a welcome home party, then he kills the grandparents, and then he skedaddled. They finally tracked him down to a motel, and they went in there with extreme force with water cannons, and they blew out the windows. In fact, they were using such powerful water cannons, they blew the front door off its hinges. And they went in and they found Boyson apparently suffering from self-inflicted knife wounds. He was trying to kill himself. And again, I mentioned this is a classic pattern we have seen in people who are on prescription antidepressants. They'll go on a killing spree and then they try and commit suicide. Time and time again. And especially given that this guy was burglarizing pharmacies. We need to know, was he in fact on these medications? Because they made him feel great, and then it blows up. And I know from personal experience this can happen. Because many, 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 many years ago, my doctor put me on antidepressants. And I felt great for 3 weeks. And in week number 4, it all fell apart. And I didn't go out and kill anybody. And I didn't commit suicide, obviously. And I got through it by saying, this is a chemical reaction, this is a chemical reaction, this is a chemical reaction. These prescription antidepressants are the nation's biggest single drug problem. And nobody wants to look at it. Corporate media doesn't want to lose those juicy advertising contracts. Congress doesn't want to lose those juicy campaign donations. And so we're always told, oh, those street dealers with their marijuana, they're the villains, they're the bad ones you've got to watch out for. You can trust your doctor and your pharmaceutical corporations to only do what's best for you. And of course the blame goes on the guns. Oh, had to be the guns. The guns were the villain. The guns are the bad thing here. And apparently down in Colorado, the debate on gun control has become so decisive. We're seeing this story out of freedomoutpost.com, where it says that the Colorado Democrats seem ready and willing to spark a revolution over this issue, because they're calling for these tyrannical gun control measures that would actually ban the standard hunting shotgun. Now, over in Ex-Republic TV, they're noting that Dianne Feinstein has stopped talking about banning high-capacity magazines and banning semi-automatics, and she's now openly saying, ban all weapons. That's the real agenda, to disarm the American people, to take away from you your ability to say no. And remember, free people can say no. Slaves cannot. There is no freedom without the freedom to say no. And I guarantee you, when they take away the guns, if they succeed in that, next they're going to come for your gold and your silver, just like they did in 1933, and for exactly the same reason, to prop up the failing banking system. Now, a little bit of good news. Up in Washington State, the bill for a universal background check on all gun purchases died in the Washington State Senate, because they understand criminals who would be blocked from buying guns by a universal background check will simply break into somebody else's home, or a police car, or the gun store to get the guns they want. Or they'll go down to Fast and Furious and get a brand new assault rifle courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. Or they could go over to one of these areas where the local media, in an attempt to shame gun owners, is publishing their names and addresses. Oh, we can get some really cool weapons over here at this librarian's home. Now, as we mentioned last week, the Southern Poverty Law Center has launched a new campaign to convince America that the time has come to deal with the patriot movement. Ooh, those bad patriot movement. Oh, these frightening numbers of angry American citizens preparing to defend themselves if the U.S. government declares martial law. They're heavily armed. They're blinded by an intractable hatred of government authority. And it's warning, these are white, right-wing Americans. They're obsessively attached to guns. They're just spinning this as hard as they can with every psychologically loaded word to portray Americans who stand by the Bill of Rights as somehow evil. And the Southern Poverty Law Center is now declaring, and I'm not kidding you, that white, right-wing Americans are a greater danger to the United States than international terrorism. Which is technically kind of sort of true, considering that most of the international terrorism is false flag and staged anyway. You know, the Adam Perlmans and the Joseph Cohens and the rest of that ilk. So, let us all gather for our 2-minute hate of those dangerous Americans and their radical ideas like honest elections, truthful corporate media, value-based currency, an end to corruption, end to massive financial fraud, restoring the Bill of Rights, and letting Israel fight their own gosh darn wars. We must slap down these patriots before they turn the United States of America into the United States of America. Going to grab a phone call. Michael in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. You're talking about the article. When I woke up this afternoon, I was just on fire when I read this article in the LA Times, when I read this op-ed piece. It was so infuriating to me. It was so ridiculous that I shared it with literally everyone I could ever contact in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost crazy talk.
They're panicking. They're in a panic. They're trying to find some way to demonize those American people who are standing up and saying we want to restore the republic. We want to go back to the government that we were taught in school we lived under. We want to go back to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and freedom for the people and reasonable controls on the economic excesses of the money junkies. And every part of that is extraordinarily reasonable, and they're trying to find a way to demonize us. And they're not really succeeding. And by the way, as a side note, I take a great deal of personal pride that my website, whatreallyhappened.com, is on the list of websites that are deemed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as so evil and vile you dare not read them or your nose will drop off. So we're going to, Michael, stick with me. We've got to take a break for commercials, and when we come back, I'm going to pick up with you on this topic again. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center, which seems to have solved poverty to the extent where they can launch this campaign to demonize anybody who stands up and dares say that the federal government is heading in a wrong direction, that they have broken the contract with the American people, that they have escaped their constitutional restrictions, and basically are acting in a very illegitimate manner at the particular moment. And we were talking with Michael in North Carolina, who read the version of the article in the Los Angeles Times, and I can understand why you're upset. But I also understand what the Southern Poverty Law Center is trying to do. They don't have a reasonable counter-argument to everybody standing up and saying these wars are illegal. The Federal Reserve is a Ponzi scheme. The government has lied to us about virtually everything it's doing, including the reasons for the war in Iraq, the ratification of the 16th Amendment. They don't have counter-arguments. And so all they can do is call the other side names, and that's what they're doing. And the fact that the Southern Poverty Law Center is launching on this campaign tells us they've run out of counter-arguments. They don't have an answer to the concern of ordinary Americans about the disastrous direction this nation is on. And so all they can do is sit up there and call us names. And like the Soviet Union, just say, oh, they're all mentally ill, take away their guns.
Yeah, Mike, and by the way, the fact that you're being monitored, that's why I tune in. That's where I know I'm in the right place.
Yes, greetings to our friends in national intelligence.
Yes, and I'm at the top of the list, too, because here's a crazy thing. I'm a veteran.
Yes.
I believe in the Constitution, and I own firearms.
Mm-hmm.
I am the threat. I am the huge threat now. And this LA Times article just reinforces everything. It's being ramped up. It's being ramped up. Are they going to come to my house?
They might at some point eventually. But we're starting to see this. I mean, if you look at this militarization of the American police forces, you very clearly come to understand that the mindset inside Washington, D.C. is they're at war, or they're preparing to go to war against the 50 states.
Oh, Mike, you and I both know that the arming of the American police force has been going on for decades.
Yeah, but it's really escalated in recent years with all these new armored tanks and area denial weaponry and drones and all the rest of that stuff.
No, Mike, they get them for free.
Yeah. Well, no, we're paying for it.
In a lot of cases.
We're paying for it. We're paying for our own cage, and we're paying for our own repression.
I don't know. It's just, this article struck me as, as a student of history, this article struck me as, wow. It was so stark and in your face and just like, matter of fact, like I'm the LA Times and I'm going to pronounce all of these people as demons, and that's it, and I'm the LA Times, and you just need to accept it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's horrible. Horrible.
All righty. Anything else, Mike?
No, man. You have a good day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. Now then, we're getting this story coming out of Intel Hub, where Democrats more and more are starting to demand a reinstatement of the military draft. We know that Rangel was out there trying to put a motion through Congress. He is apparently getting a huge amount of support from the Democrats. We're going to have a draft. We need to send more of our young men and our young women over there to fight those gosh darn Iranian Arab Muslims who hate us for our freedoms and the rest of that stuff. And they're starting to get more and more support for this. And a reminder, this new version of the draft will include young women. Now, a while back, they were trumpeting on the corporate media about how great it was women were finally being allowed into combat roles. They're trying to sell you on the idea that, yes, wouldn't you love your daughter to go off and be on the other side of the world conquering oil fields? And they're not getting a lot of traction with that. And as I pointed out before, historically, it is only when a nation fears to lose a war that they will place their women in harm's way, because they're no longer thinking about the post-war economic reality where you want to be rebuilding your population as quickly as you can. And I'm not being sexist, and I'm not being a male chauvinist pig when I say that, because women are the ones who create the next generation. You don't place them at risk if you're thinking about rebuilding your nation after the war. Only when the government fears to be losing the war are they going to place their women at risk. And then it'll be younger children. We saw that in Nazi Germany. So it's a warning sign. By the way, in response to the gentleman who called in earlier about why the military aren't standing up to what's going on, there's a crackdown going on. There's this story in From the Trenches World Report where the U.S. Army is now ordering all of their soldiers, do not criticize Obama. It is an order. You will only say good things about the Führer. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Dan the man is in the control room, ready to take your calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following up on this new call for a reinstatement of the military draft, including this time our young women, our daughters. I'd like to read you something here. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That's the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. And what it means is a military draft is illegal under that Constitution. And I'm sure my informing you of that has put me firmly on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of dangerous, angry, white, gun-loving, radical patriots. And I take a great deal of pride in that. Now, continuing along the road to extreme dictatorship, the Obama administration is drawing up plans to authorize all U.S. spy agencies full access to all of your financial data. Anywhere, everywhere. To fight terror. Of course, they're not fighting terror. They're looking for any extra cash they can grab to prop up this Ponzi scheme banking system until they can get World War III really going. And they are getting desperate. They're taking more and more desperate actions. Smearing the patriots, grabbing the guns, getting ready to grab the gold. It's all the signs of a government that is literally hanging on by its fingernails right now. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. Now, speaking of government lies and deceptions, we have our wonderful little textbook example, Human-Caused Global Warming. And so we're hearing over here from the French media, unseasonal winter storm strikes northern Europe. Just when France thought spring might be around the corner, a fresh winter storm brought heavy snowfall across the country, tens of thousands of homes without electricity, travel disrupted across Europe. Belgium today had a temperature of minus 14.4 degrees centigrade. That is the coldest March 13th on record since 1847. Now, contrary to the carbonazis screaming about melting polar caps and drowning polar bears, the Arctic ice extent is the highest it has been in the last 10 years. There are now 17,000 more Manhattans of ice than on the same date in 2006. The world is getting colder, not warmer. Sea level measurements along the coast of California are showing sea levels in decline. Remember the big Carbonazi warning, if we don't stop global warming, the coasts will drown. New York will be underwater. Probably clean out the place. Another article out of wonderground.com. Frankfurt Airport was closed. We reported that yesterday. Quarter of the flights out of Paris had to be canceled. Belgium is suffering record traffic jams. High-speed trains couldn't leave the stations because of this major winter storm in March. Now, NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, has been caught yet again fudging the data to try and claim that we're in a warming period. So anybody who says there's no such thing as large government conspiracies, you point at ClimateGate. 2000, they were saying snow is a thing of the past. The world is warming. Carbon dioxide's the problem. Carbon dioxide's actually up. And the world is getting colder. Every one of their claims fell apart. And look at all the various entities that were involved in perpetrating this fraud on the people of planet Earth to trick them out of carbon taxes. The United Nations, the IPCC, NASA, NOAA, Penn State, Hadley CRU, and on and on and on. Somebody said, we're going to claim the world is warming, we'll get carbon taxes and wealth out of it. And not only were they wrong, a warmer world would actually benefit the human race. You go back and you look at the historical record for the Roman warming period or the medieval warming period. It was times of prosperity and plenty for all. Food was growing everywhere. And that allowed people to divert time away from grabbing their next meal or working for the next meal from the lords and masters into art and science. And we saw this incredible flowering of civilization and culture during these periods. But for the money junkies who want you to be dependent on them for everything in your life, a warmer planet is to be avoided. Well, they got what they wanted. The planet's actually getting cooler and cooler. Going to take a phone call. Dan in New York. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Hey, guys. How's it going? Glad to call in. I heard you talking about the draft a little while ago, and I wanted to bring up a point about Mr. Rangel, how back in, I think it was around 2007 or so, he was drafting bills that were extending the draft age for both men and women from 18 to age 42.
Mm-hmm.
And now, this is something that doesn't get brought up a whole lot in the mainstream when they're talking about the draft. Most people think about it as like an 18, 20-year-old problem. But here we are in America, and you could have 30, 40-year-olds thinking, hey, I'm safe. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to get shipped off to service to fight wherever these banker wars want to take place.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, they've very quietly been upping this age over the past several years. And I think that's a point that not a lot of folks are thinking about. And frankly, as somebody who's in his 30s, that kind of bothers me, you know? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, like the idea that they're talking about drafting women, this is an indication of a government that is very much concerned they're losing these wars. Because when you're taking the 18 to 21 years old, these are people just out of high school, maybe thinking about college, they haven't really entered the economy in a productive sense. But when you're talking about drafting people up to age 42, you're talking about pulling people out of established businesses, people who are critical to the company that they work for, mid-level management at least. And again, that's not showing a lot of thinking in terms of what the nation is going to be like after the war is over. And it's another indication that our government has already realized they're losing these wars.
I completely agree. It's almost as if they're grasping at straws in that respect, having to go to such a high age. I also think that's the type of thing that would really bite them in the long term. because there's nothing that's going to wake up a group of sleeping giants than, say, telling some 40-year-old, hey, you're on your way to boot camp now, friend. Good luck on that war over in China. To me, it also is an indication of the fact that whatever is the next conflict that these folks are going to lie about to get us into is going to be at one much grander scale than anything we've seen so far.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this point, most people don't realize we're already into World War III. The public presentation is, oh, it's an action here in Iraq, and it's an action over here in this other country, and it's a lot of little wars. And at some point, there's going to be a big bang. They may stage it over there in Korea, where all of a sudden the world wakes up and realizes, yeah, we're back in another world war. How the heck did we get here? And I'm sure future history books are going to look back at this time and say, yeah, the world was already into World War III here at the dawn of 2013.
Completely agree, Mike. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. Thank you for the phone call. Now then, winding up on this whole ClimateGate situation and how they're still trying to raise on a busted flush. We saw it last week where there were this new report out. The world is not only getting warmer, it's the rate of warming is increasing dramatically, drastically. If we don't take action now, you're all going to die. And they were even grasping at other straws like saying, oh, a warmer world means more pollen, hay fever sufferers, and people with allergies are going to be harmed by global warming. And they're just trying to pound this thing. And CNN was doing a story about this algae bloom that is being blamed for the death of manatees along the Gulf Coast of Florida, like billions of gallons of crude oil, and corrects it had nothing to do with it. And they're talking about the algae and the rest of it, and the bimbo pipes up and says, oh, is this the fault of global warming? And absolutely threw the person who was doing the report, who was not prepared for the question. But it's like, at every opportunity, blame global warming, that's the agenda, carbon taxes, and a global environmental authority. And they're getting actually ridiculous. So anyway, we have this Navy Admiral Samuel J. Locklear III saying that global warming is now a bigger threat to the national security than terrorism is. And that in the not-too-distant future, nations are going to be displaced by rising sea levels. Okay, Admiral, let me ask you this. If global warming is caused by human activity, then the biggest single offender has got to be the U.S. military, which is the greatest single user of these fossil fuels on the planet, plus all the heat that's coming out from the firing of all these munitions. So if the world is at threat from human-caused global warming, let's shut down the biggest offender, the U.S. military, right now. Now, we all understand that much of what is on America's corporate media is a joke. Reality shows have just reached absolute absurd levels, but they're put on the networks because they're very inexpensive to produce, and they need to keep something on the air to surround the commercials. And some of these shows have been hit with major scandals. Storage wars, for example. One of their disaffected members went public that the rare treasures that are found inside these storage lockers are in fact planted to be found, which makes sense. These storage lockers represent people who are in such financial straits they can't pay the rental on the storage locker. If there's something of value in there, then before the lock gets put on, empty your storage locker and sell the stuff. Now, I realize some of these storage lockers represent people who have passed on without, emptying out the storage locker, but that's fraud. And now we're getting this story here about this new travel show that's on BBC and the Travel Channel. It's about an Amazonian Indian tribe. And they're showing things about how young boys are subjected to painful ant stings as a rite of passage. Because according to the Matsigenga tradition, he must be cleansed and endure the ancient punishments. And it turns out, ethnographers are saying it's a complete fake. The show went in and they basically paid this group of Amazonian natives to just do whatever the producers wanted for the camera. And it's a complete fraud. It's just whatever they think will lure you in. Oh, let's tune in and watch the little boy get stung by ants. And it's nonsense. They're trying to find something that's more and more sensational. It's totally tabloid. Totally, totally tabloid. And their audience numbers are still in decline. They're really, again, looking at our local cable lineup, we're on Time Warner Cable out here. Everything on there is stuff we have seen 20 to 30 times before. Except for that new History Channel show, The Vikings, which is very well done. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. But honesty and accuracy on the educational channels appears to have gone away. They're not educational any longer. I see some stuff that's on the science channels that is so incredibly bogus. And you wonder how they have the nerve to call themselves a science channel any longer. Same thing with this show about the Amazonians on BBC and the Travel Channel. It's not an accurate representation of what's out there. Now, the state of Mississippi has weighed in on the debate on large soft drinks. Now, they're taking the opposite position. They want to pass a law saying that you cannot ban food based on its dietary content. Now, whether or not you agree with the idea that we ought to be more aware of the nutritional value or harm of what we're being sold by fast food companies, supermarkets, and there's a lot of food fraud going on in the country. And by the way, apparently Tesco just found more horse meat in their frozen meatloaf 11 days after they said we've solved the problem. So, a lot of that going on. But Mississippi is doing the same thing that Mayor Bloomberg is doing. They can't deal with the real problems in their state. So they're going to justify their position in government and their privilege by messing around with diet sodas. Even though they're taking the opposite position from Mayor Bloomberg, it's the same thing. I can't solve what's really gone wrong with this state. I don't dare stand up to the federal government. I don't dare stand up to the private central bankers. So I'm going to get into high dudgeon about soft drinks and the rest of it. Now, we are seeing, again, a pushback by vaccine manufacturers regarding the recent United Nations declaration that mercury-based preservatives, like thimerosal, must be taken out of vaccines because of the growing body of evidence that links these mercury-based preservatives to conditions like autism. And the vaccine industry is pushing back because without the preservatives, the shelf life of the vaccines is much shorter, there's more loss, decline in profitability. Also, somebody sent me an article pointing out that thimerosal is not just a preservative, it is considered one of the adjuvants that deliberately provokes a response from the body in order to make the vaccine more effective. So it's all about profits over what's really good for the patient, is really what it's all about. And it continues to be that way. I remember not too long ago where they were announcing, yes, we're going to take the thimerosal out. And then they started making exceptions. Vaccines already in the supply chain were exempt. Vaccines that were stored in warehouses were exempt, and more and more. And finally, we had that ridiculous rider on the Homeland Security Act that said people harmed by vaccines can no longer sue the vaccine manufacturers because they're a critical component of our defense against the terrorists. All right, we're going to take a break here for some commercials. And we'll be right back for the last segment of our show today. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just want to wrap up the show here. I'm going to try and get to this last phone call here, but I wanted to hit this topic first. We're seeing more and more of these stories about all these strange hacker attacks against celebrities' personal information being made public, which doesn't do the hackers who do that any good at all other than to create headline news. J.P. Morgan Chase is claiming they suffered a cyber attack that took down their online banking. And government officials are now saying cyber attacks a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda. I guess they're starting to realize Al-Qaeda has ceased to be a big scarecrow for the American people, and now everything's a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda. Global warming, cyber attacks, and all the rest of that stuff. And we're seeing these stories. Remember when they were saying the electronic Al-Qaeda army claims to have hacked U.S. government websites. And here's a direct quote from that story. The actors taking credit for the breach, and I can stop quoting at that point. The emphasis is on the actors. Because what I think is going on is the American financial system is on the verge of a collapse. And if it collapses, the American people are going to point their fingers at the federal government and say, look, you let it happen. You repealed Glass-Steagall. You refused to prosecute Wall Street for massive fraud. You looted the American people to prop up this failed Ponzi scheme banking system. And so I think we're seeing this heightened awareness of all these foreign hacking attacks from Russia, from China, from Iran, from everywhere, all the enemies. I think the plan is that at the point where they cannot hold America's financial system together any longer, it is the U.S. government itself that will crash the financial center computer systems, and they will blame Al-Qaeda, Iran, Russia, China for it. So instead of the financial collapse being the result of their own crimes, corruption, and stupidity, it's now an act of war. Those dastardly Iranian, Chinese, Russian hackers did it. And we'll go to war. And it allows them to duck the responsibility for all that they have done. And it gets Wall Street off the hook. We didn't do anything. We were just on the verge of turning this around. Look at how well the stock market was doing. We were on the way up here when those dastardly hackers came in. So I think we need to be aware that we may be looking at a new 9/11 false flag, only this one will be in cyberspace. It'll be virtual, and it will slam every single American with a bank account to maximize the shock value. So again, the common sense advice we hand out to all of our readers and listeners: only have as much money in the bank as it takes to cover your obligations. Keep the rest under your own control. All right, real quick, Maryland and Michigan, aloha, what's on your mind?
Michael, long-time listener here. You've been saying when we collapse, we need to be thinking about our new government.
Yes.
All I'm saying is, why wait? While you expose the problems and the lies, and I concur with most of it with you, I've been working on a solution. I'm sorry I called so late. I can't even get into it. I'll call you back tomorrow. Can we talk about a solution?
Yes, we can. We are already planning the blueprint for the new America. I'm working on a document. It's very long and involved. We're going to get it out there. The time to start planning for our new government is now. So I hear the magic music. It is time to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday. Bill Shaw will be with us here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, make good choices. That's exactly what Thomas Jefferson said was the highest duty of any American citizen. So until tomorrow, aloha America.